I think one of the hardest things in life is to try to understand what love is. Everybody in your life growing up ends up telling you that they love you, or at least they should, and that becomes the problem. It becomes an obligation instead of something that's real and something that you can count on. And the reality of life is that the things that are going to hurt you the most are going to be related to people that you love. It's going to be failed relationships. It's going to be families. It's going to be losing something you loved, even if it's just an object, But the thing about love, too, is it's also the greatest thing that you're ever going to experience. Nothing's better than love. It literally makes you feel alive. And it's what makes life worth it. Because reality, it's cruel, it's harsh. But the thing about love is, it makes it worth it somehow. I think one of the mysteries of life is that even philosophically, we don't understand what love is. Everybody thinks they do. And I know this because I've asked like hundreds of people this question, like, what is love? Like, do you really believe in love? And everybody says they do. And the thing is, everybody can give examples. And everybody feels an emotion about those examples. But when it comes to actually describing the logical understanding of love, they don't understand. And I got to this point where I would ask people, like, do you believe in love? And the answer they would always give is give an example or say it's an emotion and then double down on that's what it means to them. But the problem is you have the example, you have the emotion about it, and then you have the logical understanding. And these are all three separate layers. And you can't understand them by just saying it's one thing. So the way I would get around this problem of people trying to refer to love as an example or just an emotion is they would end up asking me, like, hey, how are you doing? And I would say, I've been better. And they'll ask me, like, what's going on? Like, and I would say, like, hey, can I ask you a personal question? And they would usually say yes. And the question would be this: do you believe in love? Or do you think it's just something that people make up to make themselves feel better about life? And the thing is, I've never once had one person say they didn't believe in love. And I would ask them, like, can you give me an example? And they would always be able to give me an example. And even for me, I would feel like this is love. And it would confirm to me that love is real. And I would say to them, like, I can feel that. Like, I can feel that love. And they would say, yeah, like, I feel it too. And they would think that's the end of it. But then I would ask them, I get all that, but what's the logic behind love? And that's the interesting part, because this would happen every single time the person goes to open their mouth. They literally open their mouth and nothing comes out. And you can see halfway through the thought process, the panic settle in, right? Where they realize, like, I really don't know what love is. And that, I think, is the core problem. It's not that we don't know what love is. It's that we don't even know that we don't know what love is. So then for me, the question would be, like, why not just go to the dictionary, right? The dictionary is supposed to be where we get our logical understanding of words. So when we look at the dictionary and we look at love, we have different types of love, right? Like the Greeks had 7 different versions of love. And, the Bible talks about the different qualities of love, right? But those aren't actual logical definitions. When we look at the dictionary, it says love is a strong affection for a person, place, or a thing. But what happens when you have an example like where someone lays down their life for a stranger? Right? Someone risks their life to save a stranger. Is that not love? And if it is love, then how does that make sense with the dictionary? Even the Bible says that, there's no greater love than someone can have than to lay down their life for someone. So when we look at the dictionary, is it really true? And for me, it doesn't make sense. I think the reason why love is such a hard thing to understand is that it works on multiple layers. It's like a phone number, right? If you don't get the sequence right, it won't work. If you don't have the numbers right, it's not going to work. And it's not so much about perfection as it is about balance. And it's having all these different layers aligned with themselves. And so these are the different layers. So the first layer is choice. And the reason why it's choice is because if you don't choose something, do you have any responsibility in it? Right? If someone loves you, like your parents, and you don't really have a choice in it, it's like, do you actually get any of the credit for that love? And so when we talk about you loving someone, it becomes a choice, and it has to be a choice that you make, right? Because there's a difference between being loved and accepting love from others and loving others. The next layer to love is what you have in your life. And this is one of the ones that's kind of counterintuitive, and it took me a while to grasp this. But if you don't spend any time with someone you love or spend time with the things you love, that changes the context of your love. One of the most fundamental parts of love is the time spent together. It's the quality, but it's also how long. And I think that when you really break down relationships, and where a lot of relationships go wrong, is because there's so much time apart that the time together doesn't make up for it. Right? And so when we're talking about this layer, this is the layer of like what you accomplished in life. It's being married and being in relationships. Right? And all these things matter. But just because you choose someone and just because you have them in your life does not mean you actually love them. But you have to choose them, and you have to have them in your life for that love to be able to flow. The next layer after what you have is love itself. And I'm not talking about just the emotion of love. I'm talking about you have choice, and it leads to having something. But that having something has separated every other choice, right? This is the thing that you want. And when you really start to resonate with that thing, you start to love it because you see the other options. And you're just drawn to this thing in spite of the other options, right? It's where your emotions like perk up and start flowing in your body, right? It's that feeling of life, right? When you start a new relationship. But the problem with that is, even if it's everything that we live for, if it's not real, then it's not true. So to have true love, it has to be based in truth. So it's not just enough to have something, to choose something and to love it. It has to be real. So that leads to the next layer, which is truth. And the paradox with truth is that, like, what is true and who dictates what's true? Right? We can go to physics and we can like pull out general relativity and try to apply that to relationships to have some concrete foundation to have truth in our relationships. But like how much of love isn't quantifiable by science? And then even when you get down to general relativity, I mean, general relativity doesn't work at a quantum level. It doesn't work in a black hole. So how reliable is any of this stuff? And so when I talk about truth, what I'm really saying is trust. Because who you trust and what you trust is what's true to you. I'm not saying that truth is subjective. Truth is always going to be truth. The universe itself sits in truth. And what I mean is that when the universe dies and entropy kicks in, truth is still going to be truth. But from our perspectives, all we have is perspective. But when we come together and we're authentic with each other, with like our love, what our choices are, there's a connection that we have. Like when I'm looking at something and I'm like really sure it's true and I'm being authentic and someone else is seeing the same thing, that's what we all live for. And that's what really bridges the gap and allows that love to flow in between us. When we actually believe something together and work in unity. What allows trust to work is the fact that it's repeatable. Right? When we're in a relationship and we let down our guard, it doesn't mean that that person won't betray us. But when we learn to trust each other by living in truth, that's the only assurance we're ever going to have. And is it a fail-safe? And the answer is no. Like someone can be at your side all your life and then betray you at the last moment. Just like Judas. It's always a risk. And that's why it's always got to be trust. The thing that happens when trust erodes in a relationship, or you just don't have it, or you only focus on love without trust, is that's where people get manipulated. Right? And the next layer to love after trust is sacrifice. And the thing is, that comes down to a choice again. When you have something in your life and you're choosing that thing over and over again, you're sacrificing for that thing. Especially when that person who says they love you gives you stipulations and hoops to jump through. Right? Real love doesn't want you to sacrifice more than you have to. Right? Real sacrifice to someone, like when you really love someone and you sacrifice for them, that sacrifice doesn't mean anything until they accept it. And so it's a risk again. Right? But when you have someone in your life that you choose over and over again, and you love them, and it's true, that sacrifice is what makes that relationship last. And it's the only thing that really does. And that's why you need all 5 of these layers for love to actually work. Right? Because sacrifice becomes a choice and it leads you back to the start, and it becomes this cycle that happens over and over again. You're choosing to have that person in your life. You're choosing to let that emotion of love flow out of you. You're choosing to be authentic with them. So it actually has that love actually has true meaning. That is a sacrifice. right? It's not just one thing. Love is this thing that just cycles through us, through our actions, through our choices, and eventually we become that love, right? We flow, that love comes into us and flows out of us, but it fills us first. Biggest problem that comes from love filling us first is that it's a choice for us to love people. And it's a choice to hold on to that love inside of you. But what do you do with that love that's flowing inside of you? You have to freeze it to keep that identity of I'm a loving person while still not loving others. And so that's where pride starts coming in, where you take that love that's inside of you and you turn it into an identity instead of actually doing the thing that you claim to be. And it's because of the reasons that you have, and they're all valid. At least to you they are, which justifies why you don't do it. And so the big disconnection in love, and the reason why it becomes so toxic, is because when love isn't true, it's not real. And when love is true and someone's not willing to sacrifice for that love, it's because it doesn't have as much value to them as it does to you. And so you aren't aligned. Like, even if you do love each other and it is true, it's not equal. It's not balanced. And that's what we really want. And it's like, you know, a lot of the times it's like, it's not balanced because we're just scared to love, or we don't want to be used, or we just don't know how to, right? Because every single time that we've loved before, it's been taken advantage of, right? So the whole point of this video is to give context into when it's okay to trust someone with love, like when it's okay to actually like dive into love. And the thing that I found is that love works when that person that you love also sacrifices for the relationship, even if it hurts them. Because nobody's going to invest in a relationship that in ways that suck for them if that love isn't authentic, right? There's so many relationships, the most toxic relationships are going to be the ones where people ask you to sacrifice so they don't have to, and then call that love. Because real love would do that, right? Real love would sacrifice itself so you don't have to sacrifice. But real love doesn't require you to do it, right? When you have two people that are willing to sacrifice for each other and they won't let each other sacrifice unnecessarily, that is the best situation you can ever be in, where you become slaves to each other. And that's really what it is. It's becoming two people becoming one, and it's under God, because we're all connected to God. We're all part of the kingdom of God. And so the question then is like, where does love actually come from? And it comes from God, right? The Bible says like that's where love comes from. And I think that we have this understanding that like God is everything, and we're all part of God. And in Christianity, it's you're part of the body of God. You know, in Hinduism and Eastern philosophies, it's everything is part of God. And so the thing that separates us in every culture is this fall into illusion, you know? And when we sacrifice our egos to God, it thins that ego. And that allows for more of God's light to flow through us. And that is that love. right? So it's love is like a water, like a river that flows through you, but it's also like light that emanates from you. So I'll close this up by saying that in order to trust someone, in order to have real love, it needs to come from your character. And it comes through your character by you going to God and being authentic with God. Right? And even if you don't believe in God, believing that truth matters and that truth is outside of yourself and aligning to reality is actually good enough. Because if you believe in God, but what you believe just isn't true, it's not going to matter. It'll always just be an act. Right? So what matters isn't if you believe in God. It matters that what you believe is authentic to who you really are from your current perspective. Not that it's true, but that you're relying on something that you trust. Because when trust gets broken, it evolves. When truth gets broken, there's something wrong. Right? Trust allows you to bend with the wind. Right? To not be so rigid that when reality doesn't work out the way you want it to, that you try to force it to work the way you want it to. It allows you to change. And that's what true ego death is. It's real change. It's not going from one state to another. It's actually sacrificing that ego. And that's why it matters. That's why sacrifice matters. That's why accepting God's sacrifice matters. Right? Because it creates connection. Because it's in truth. Because it was done in love. And it was actually done physically. Because of a choice.